We are moving. Thank you. And welcome everyone on YouTube. We are in Romans 12 still. We began with the 18th verse, we're going to read to the 21st. And in the issue of if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. We're going back to 2 Kings, the 6th chapter, and we're going to read. And when they had come down to him, this is in verse 18, Elisha prayed unto the Lord and said, smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha said unto them, this is not the way, neither is this the city. Follow me, and I'll bring you to the man whom you seek, which was worthless himself. But he led them to Samaria. And it came to pass, when they had come into Samaria, that Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men, that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. You have to understand, Samaria is the heart, strength, and soul of the northern kingdom, right in the middle of the might of the northern kingdom. And the king of Israel said unto Elisha, when he saw them, my father, shall I smite them? Shall I smite them? And he answered, thou shalt not smite them. Wouldst thou smite down those whom thou hast taken captive with thy sword and with thy bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. And he prepared great provision for them. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. So the bands of Syria came no more into the land. Now, was that a military defeat? Yes, it was. It just was a defeat without firing a shot. And it came as an answer to prayer to Elijah. Prophet to the northern kingdom. That's what Paul is referring to. Just because you don't avenge yourself right away doesn't mean that God doesn't have a plan for you and for your enemy. Now, there are two ways that are taught in reading the scripture. And I'll make us aware of both. One of them is to turn it over to God, let the vengeance be his. He knows how to take it, and he can do it righteously and justly. The other way of reading this is, and this is getting some traction these days, and this is a reading that I do not agree with personally, but it's out there, so I'll make you aware of it. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head, ending verse 20. In other words, they're going to see how gracious you are, and it will embarrass them. The coals of fire on the head is a euphemism for a face blushing. They're ashamed of themselves, and they will no longer be your enemy, basically turn to the gospel. I'm not saying that's impossible on an individual basis. Certainly not. I do believe that one of the best examples and the best sermons are live, graciously lived among the people of non-believers, and we'll see that as we move on in chapter 13 a little later. But I do believe that this is real. This means exactly what it says. When he says coals of fire, he means coals of fire on their head. But the trick is, we are not with that. God has a place, God has a time, we leave it to him. So when someone tells you that revenge is a dish best served cold, don't listen. It's not yours to serve. It's not mine to serve. It's God's to serve us. And he's more than capable of doing it, and he's more than willing to apply judgment where judgment is needed. Now, there was a question last week, and that is, where we're supposed to give way to wrath, which basically means put wrath in its place. I'd like to deal with that in light of the question last week, then what do we do with an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, which is also biblical under the law. And I would like to deal with that without putting us back under the law, because I don't believe there's a place for any believer anymore under the law. It does not mean that the law is not there as instruction, as example, as a guardian of principle. And it also demonstrates to us the will of God. And the will is that we accept his son, who offered better sacrifices than that of Abel, going back to the first blood offering or second blood. But overcome evil, be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good, which is a good way of winding up what he's saying, because basically that gets us all the way back up to verse 14 and down. It's a good capstone to that. Rejoice with them and you rejoice. Bless them who persecute you, bless them who curse not. That's extremely difficult to do. But that is not a suggestion. That's a command. And it's also an Old Testament command. We'll see it in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 14. I think that's correct. And then be of the same mind one toward another, and mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate, and be not wise in your own conceits. If you're taking notes and you want to compare scripture, Luke 20:46 and Luke 11:43.
What's that, Jake?
You can take that verse 16 to a comparative scripture in the Gospels, Luke 11:43 and Luke 20:46. Now let's start into this business about recompense no man evil for evil and life and eye for an eye. And let's turn to I think I should have checked for Proverbs 22. I seem a little disorganized while you were having your memorial service out here yesterday. We had one up at the ranch. We had a middle service up there. And I was writing this down in between time when people were showing up and people were leaving. But sometimes I got a little, I think it's a little out of order. Let's see here. Proverbs 20, verse 22 and 23. Say not thou, I will recompense evil, but wait on the Lord. And he shall save thee. Divers weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good. And you notice providing honest weights in the sight of all men is mentioned also again in Romans 12. But not to recompense evil. You don't pay it back. For instance, you have to pay back in like kind if you're in the payback mode. If I borrow from you 30 American dollars, I should be paying you back in 30 American dollars. If you receive evil from somebody and you offer evil back, neither of you benefit. And both of you are injured, largely by your own action. But evil is always likened in the Bible to darkness. And the good, or truth, is likened unto light. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. That's what evil is, and paying it back, paying darkness for darkness. You're just adding to the darkness. You're adding to the confusion and the tumult. But light will drive out darkness. You give somebody the good of something, you give somebody the truth of something. In light of the darkness he has introduced, and it will dispel that darkness. It will scatter it. Anybody who's ever lighted a candle on Christmas Eve has seen that work. And we are told, and we should know, who is the light of the world. And you don't repay, or we should not repay, the deeds of the father of darkness with the fruits of that tree. That will always be evil. Remember, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We're the ones who accepted the acceptance of Christ, bringing the darkness into our own lives. God was not responsible for that, but he has provided that way out, which was the life of his own son. Now, let's have a look. Let's make sure about this eye for an eye thing. Let's go to Exodus 21:24. Yes, Exodus 21:24. And I think we'll see this in the first recitation of the law of Moses.
What was it?
Exodus 21:24. I have it right. Okay, this is under the law that Moses is given, and this is what is to happen if a man were to strive and hurt a woman who is pregnant and she loses a child. All right, this is under that rubric. So that a fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall surely be punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And if any mischief follow, any further injury to the woman, then thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, Burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Sounds pretty vengeful, doesn't it? Okay, now I want to point out to you that there are two major sections of the law. One is the religious law dealing with the service of the tabernacle, the order of worship, the approach to the altar, the offering of the blood, and all the purifications. And then you have the civil law, how you deal among the nation. This is what we would call court law under the civil law. I run my car into your car. Okay, so that's what liability insurance is all about. This is what in an age when there is insurance, this is how you make that good. The eye for an eye is if let's say I go out and I get just stinking drunk and beat up some young gal who's pregnant, she loses a child. The husband determines what I need to pay for the loss of that child. If further injury accrues to the woman, then it says that's where you see life for life, and so forth, down to eye for an eye. But I want to point out, this is largely overlooked by most people. These life for life is a maximum penalty. If the mischief were to follow, that she were to die, your life is going to be taken, but your goods are left with your family. Your life is given for her life, all right? You've already made amends for the loss of the child monetarily. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand. You can ask for that, but no more. These are maximum penalties for proportionate responsibility under the civil law. Now, I want to point out to you that under the law, whether it's religious or civil, I'm talking Moses' law given by God, forgiveness is always in order.
Is one.
Always in order. You can forgive it. The injured party can forgive it. Even when it's an issue of life for life, they flee to the city's refuge until the judges could be called and the case could be determined. Otherwise, anybody in the family could kill him. Remember
But
that?
the family can choose not to.
The family can choose not to.
And then he doesn't have to go to the city.
That part is true, Jim. But they have to state that.
They have to stay.
And that's Republic.
I think that's important, what you're saying. These are maximum. There's a lot of other things that could happen.
Now, there are people who read this will say, if that injury happened, you have to do that.
No.
No. That's the most you can ask for under the civil law. Supposedly under our tort claim, which basically goes all the way back to this concept right here. You can ask in damages no more than what damage you received. Now we have concocted this idea of punitive damage, not just actual cost and loss, but punitive because it was done either by intent or maliciousness or whatever, which I find kind of really sketchy. And that's what gets us to the point of I spilled the hot cup of McDonald's coffee into my lap while I'm driving my car, and I'm going to sue them for $500,000 and get it.
Yeah.
I want to show somebody to prove $500,000 in damages. Under the law, they have to first and can ask no more than that. Okay. Now let's go to Leviticus 24, 19 to 22, I think. Leviticus 24, 19. Trusting again, this is a correct. No, it is a citation. Beginning of verse 19, and if a man cause
What chapter?
Leviticus 24,
Okay, thank you.
verse 19 through 22. And if a man cause a blemish, that's injury. We're not talking about a pimple here on the end of your nose. If a man cause a blemish in his neighbor, as he hath done, so shall it be done to him. See the maximum penalty. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, as he hath caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again. And he that killeth the beast, he shall restore it. And he that killeth the man, he shall be put to death. Notice the death penalty for the taking of a human life. There are two things for which there's no appeal under the law. One is what we call first-degree murder. The other one for which there's no appeal is to curse God.
Is what?
To curse God, blasphemy. You were wondering what blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is. That's cursing God. Don't let it scare you, because that's not something a believer would do. And we're all out there worried if we've ever committed the unpardonable sin. Yes, it is unpardonable, and there is no appeal, because you just heard God, who is the judge. You can't go over his head. You shall have one manner of law as well for the stranger as for one of your own country, for I am the Lord your God. See where the judge house are brought in under this too. This is also under the civil law, so not under the religious law. And I believe there are several times when we are told you will have one law for what God is talking about, and the other one is the institution of Passover itself. A stranger, who's abiding with you is welcome, and he will abide by the same law that you do every law for Passover for strangers or spiritual, because it speaks of one God. He doesn't have a separate standard for somebody else, whether they know it or not. Well, what about that person that doesn't know? God always knows. God is a righteous judge, and he will judge correctly, and we can trust to that. And so can that unbeliever in judgment day. I'm not going to put God in the box for anybody. That's where righteousness comes from. That is to whom it returns, and those of us who believe are carried with it all the way back to him. And he will deal with all the earth. Just the judge of all the earth will do right and underplay. Never forget. Never. Okay, now for the final statement, let's go to Deuteronomy, which is the second recitation of the law. That's why it has that funny name. My nephew said his favorite book of the Bible is Deuteronomy. And I think I agree with it. Deuteronomy 19. And I think we want there's that issue of focus. Deuteronomy 19. (16 to 21). The false witness rise up against any man to testify him that which is wrong. Okay, this is perjured testimony under the civil law. Then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges. See the vote there. Which shall be in those days, and the judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness be a false witness and have testified falsely against his brother, this is in a civil manner, then shall you do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. For instance, we get into court and it's a he said sort of thing. You determine who's telling the truth, and then you go to intent. Why would a person perjure himself to the injury of another person, to the extent that he intended to injure the other person is the punishment upon the perjury. Then shall you do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother, so wilt thou put the evil away from among you. Did you notice? It doesn't make you right and him wrong. It's put evil away from all of you. And thine eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Once again, maximum penalties. If I perjure myself under the civil law dealing with manslaughter or murder, it can cost a man his life. And if I'm found to have knowingly given false witness, my life is forfeit for his. I give what I wanted to take from him. See how even-handed that? Now that's extreme. I mean, you can't get. I mean, the death penalty, that's about as far as we can go in this world. But you see how even-handed that is? Those scales balance. And it's eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. And even in the matter of the manslayer, the family could waive it. Forgiveness is always in order. And Paul is telling us, don't use forgiveness as the last resort, use it as the means. Now that doesn't mean that your adversary is going to agree with you in that application. But as much as it lieth in you, as much as you are responsible, start at the point of forgiveness. Start at the point of putting the vengeance off, because you have a God who knows exactly how to exact it if it is due. in that business about putting wrath in its place. God is the one who said, vengeance is mine, I shall repay, saith the Lord. So when we take Paul's admonition of putting wrath in its place, you see who you're giving it back to. The one to whom it belongs in the first place. Putting it in its rightful place, which is in the hands of God. When we look at Romans 12, we like to say that these are instructions for what we do for the matters that are placed in our hands. If you put wrath in its rightful place, that's vengeance in the hands of God, where it does belong in his hands, not in mine. And I could say that in those areas of my life where I've taken that literally and said, all right, this is where it's going to stop as far as I'm concerned. This is not going to go, this disagreement will not be prosecuted further, and so forth and so on. I have always, because I'm commanded biblically, as a believer, I'm commanded to do that. And the first couple of times it was like, oh, shucks, I'm commanded to do that. The third or the fourth time it occurred is no, when you realize that you can do that, the end result for you is much better.
Oh, what,
Much better.
the end result?
Oh, yes, in your own personal life.
Yeah, it's just everything.
You cannot follow a command of God to your detriment. I don't believe it's possible.
Yeah.
And being kind of one, we're not supposed to be bless them who bless you, or bless them who persecute you, bless and curse not. That's not a suggestion, it's a command. Just remember who Paul is. And there's no, as much as it lieth in you on this one, you do it. This is the command of God. Paul's the one who said, if anybody was down there, proud or spiritual, and then in the knowledge of what I've written unto you are the commandments of the Lord. That's who's writing this book. And sometimes it's easy to forget the position that Paul held relative to this word. Which makes me wonder if I put enough emphasis on the written word of Paul and off to us. But he gave it to us, basically, is what it is. So he isn't just saying this to first century Christians in Rome, he's saying it to us. 2023, downtown Mansfield, underneath palm trees and the second lap past the overpass. So dearly beloved.
So,
Yes.
well, just before you leave eye for eye, Jesus talks about this too, right? Did we talk about that already? I missed that.
No.
We
Matthew,
talked about it when we're out of the room.
Matthew 5:38.
yeah, Matthew 5, I mean, in the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about this, right?
Yes.
You've heard it said.
Yeah, you've heard it said.
And yes, and it was said, and it's true.
So
It's
what's
the-
he saying there? Because he's not abolishing civil law.
No, he's not. But what he's indicating on in that sermon and later to his own apostles, you know, if you live by the sword, you're going to perish by the sword. That's why forgiveness as first order business works to your benefit. And that will come down and calm and peace, beginning with you, will answer the question about how you deal with a higher authority. Also, as you move out into that wider world of non-belief. And there's a lot of it out there. I saw some on TV just now.
Well, I was going to say what Pastor Rick was. Christ, when he said it is finished, when he was on the cross,
Yes.
well, that just showed, you know, that's why he could say what he said here, 5:38.
Yeah, we did.
You've heard the law, says punishment must match the injury and on and on. But I say, do not resist. Do not resist an evil person. Turn the other cheek. Well, that's just showing the mercy.
Forgiveness beginning. And
Well,
and a man, as soon as you
that I've already-
take your coat, give him your cloak too. If you're compelled to go a mile, go with him twain.
Yep,
Right?
yep,
It's
yep.
supposed to be our decision to follow that command of God. And I equate it back to the other things that Christians are commanded to do, including baptism. You don't have to be baptized for salvation. According to the Bible that I have, I look at the thief on the cross and a number of others. It's not something you have to do, it's something you get to do.
Yeah.
Forgiveness, on the other hand, is something we have to do, should do. And yet, when they asked him, are we supposed to forgive our brother 7 times? And he said, 70 times 7 a day. If he asks, if he asks for you forgiving 70 times, it places forgiveness, which is job 1 as far as he's concerned in his life and work. And when he said it's finished, he's talking about the sacrifice that atones for everything under the law, that no more could be given. I mean, we've reached the ultimate here, and we can take it or leave it either to our own blessing or our own eternal power.
The way I read it is, he said, I've taken care of it. You believe in me, it's taken care of.
It's the difference between the thief on his right and the thief on his left. Same current, same person, same gospel, 2 decisions. One went to paradise.
Mhm.
Well, it's been interesting today listening to you talk and reminding us about the civil and religious law. I mean, even back in the Old Testament, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, life for life. That wasn't you exacting that. It was you being able, through the civil law, to have that happen,
Yes,
right?
but
So-
it still had to come through the decision of the judge.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. The system is how that was carried out. It wasn't me going saying, you did this, I'm deciding that you did this to me, now I'm gonna carry it back. You struck me, I'm gonna strike you, so we're gonna be in a fist fight right now. And it had turned into that maybe by the time Jesus is here, because Jesus saying, listen, you've heard it said that, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, but I say you do not, you resist not evil, but whosoever smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other. It was like, okay, this isn't a personal thing. This is civil code. Your job personally is to forgive first. So even back then, you could have forgiven, but you could have taken them through the civil court and had that law apply.
Yes, when you're reading, when we're reading in Exodus, we're reading Leviticus, we're reading Deuteronomy, you have to remember this is a nation, right, which has been brought out of pagan religious system and is being placed as a theocracy under the law of God, which applies both to their worship and to their daily life in the nation. That's what the civil law and the civil calendar was all about. God is laying down a code for his people on how worship was going to be done, as Paul would describe it, decently and in order, then how they were going to live decently and in order among each other. And you'll notice that nothing Moses says contradicts anything in the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. It is a continuing revelation. We're building on the first 10. God says, now we're going to take this step and we're going to take it to this minutia of detail, so that when you go before the judges, and it's the priests and the priests are reading the law so that the judge doesn't overstep. It is the judge is to rule on fact. The priest is to give the law of God under which he can make those determinations. So you have both sides. You have both sides there.
So if we carry it out ourselves, we're stepping into the wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Under the law and under grace.
Right.
We
So
place
that doesn't matter if you're an Old Testament or New Testament.
no. That's what I'm saying. What Paul is telling us in Romans 12 does not negate anything under the law, because forgiveness was always first, that's first tier business. But then he says, as much as it lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. You'll bring out who's going to strike the first blow. As far as it remains within your power, live peaceably as with all men, as peaceably basically as you can, which is good theology and smart sociology. If you think about it.
Mhm.
So I am sorry that we didn't take more time last week to deal with that question when it did come up. And if you remember last week, we had about 40 rabbit trails going. 3 fires were burning, 2 of them had branding irons in it, and we were bumping up against a clock. So I apologize for not dealing with that in a longer basis last week and on a more full, because it is a very important question. It's on these kinds of questions where people who call themselves New Testament church will pull themselves back under law, and Paul is kicking and screaming and saying, why would you throw away the grace of God
Right.
and go back to the law that for 2,000 years we know historically we could not keep? Now we'll see later, in the New Testament where it said, well, in Hebrews where it said, had fault not been found with the first covenant, the second covenant would have been necessary. The fault wasn't with the first covenant; it was with the people who were under it who couldn't keep the covenant, because God kept His part of the bargain, and He showed us when He started it back with Abraham that He's the only one who could, because Abraham did not pass through those broken pieces of, those witness pieces of the contract. Only God did. And you have to remember, Abraham is a pagan. We all were.
You're right.
So, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, give it back to God, that's where it belongs. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him as much as it lieth in thee. Now, the model that we're given is a military model with Syria and Israel. Paul's talking about individual dealings here, person to person, what we would call interpersonal relationship. That's a term everybody likes to use these days. Take it out of the military realm. Avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, and he's harking back to Elisha and Syria, feed him. Number one, he's not going to expect. He's hungry, feed him. If he thirsts, give him drink. There's no injury in that. If you do that publicly, there's nothing publicly a person can say against what you have just done. Because if he doesn't want it, he doesn't have to take it. But you offer it. I don't think I've ever seen anybody turned away from another drink in this church after service. Or one of your potlucks. I've never seen anybody turned away. This is one way of doing it. And when you have strangers within your gates, you can bet they're not all your friends.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work out that way. And they'll show us who they are. But you show who you are by offering the feed, offering, to quench the thirst. And we know who the living water is, who will quench the ultimate thirst. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Listen, I hearken this statement to God speaking to Israel, God speaking to Ezekiel, when he tells him, you can preach as loud and as long and as effectively as you want, and they will not hear you. But I want them to know, in not hearing you, that they have had a witness in front of them telling them, I will bring that to their attention and come to judgment.
Oh,
Yes, that's where vengeance goes. If you don't believe the word of God, that is cursing God.
The blood is on their own.
Their blood is on their own hands. And they say it as a nation before Pilate. That his blood be upon us and upon our children. It was, and it is. Now, I don't know how many generations that extends. But it was. They were cast out of that land. That temple was destroyed. They were dispersed across the earth. Don't tell me that's not a judgment of God. Now, it does two things. Because they were kicked out, and Rome couldn't tell the difference. Because Rome thought Christians were all Jews. So they thought they're kicking out. Well, look what it did to the gospel. Who may or may not have been Jews. A lot of them were. Certainly that first century church was largely Jewish, probably 98%. But as time moves on, those numbers begin to change. And in Exodus time, you get your confession. God will let you have it. My spirit will not always strive with man. And when he provides for that exodus, and the cross was an exodus from under the law into grace, and they said, well, let his blood be upon us. That's acceptance of the law. We'll do it ourselves. which the law itself commands not to do. There's no way out of that fix they put themselves in. Not socially, not politically, not theologically. That's 3 strikes and you're kind of out. I see some fuzzy looks. If I can hear somebody, anybody?
No, clear to.
Okay. So I would close with this. With all of that infinitely good advice, counsel, and command, which comes down to us from the Apostle Paul, I would echo his words. Therefore, do not overcome evil. Thank you, Ken. You are that Ken. Lights on the candlestick, then it might give light to the whole house. Questions? Comments? We'll be ready for 13 Lord willing next week. Thank you. Bill, would you close the prayer for us?